Well, I have a problem, and I'm going to try to deal with it this morning. I have too many friends. I have Facebook friends, I have neighborhood friends, I have church friends, and it's just too many to keep track of and too many to service appropriately with what you deserve. So I'm going to take a week off from the Sermon on the Mount and preach on politics. That should take care of the friends abundance problem. 4 years ago, 2016 election cycle, you may have thought we couldn't sink any further into political polarization and bitter verbiage than we did in that 2016 presidential campaign, but we did. It's continued to get worse. It's more challenging than ever to try to think through issues from a Christian worldview without dealing with polarized, impassioned, sometimes terribly irrational opinions and arguments. So my goal for today is not to endorse anyone. I think I'll help you make some decisions. But my goal is to apply a shepherd's heart to sheep who are being pushed and pulled and berated in a tsunami of political bilge and acrimony that just rages in our nation. I'm not endorsing a candidate, but I want to urge you and help you to think biblically as you decide what to do with your precious vote and whatever amount of influence that you have on other people. I understand that you might be tempted to want to just close your eyes and turn your back and not vote at all. You might even think that not voting is a way to make your own little statement about how disgusting the whole process has become. I get that. I understand that. But I don't think that that's a wise direction to go. It's hard to see our situation appropriately against the backdrop of world history and church history, but it's important. Let me just take a moment to talk about that. Imagine you could time travel back to the days of the first century church in the time of the apostles, and you could ask someone who had just received, say, their church's copy of the book of Romans or 1 Peter, and suppose you got invited to their home Bible study, and you ask them, I'm from the 21st century, and I wonder, what do you think about who should I vote for in the situation we face? They wouldn't understand. They would stare at you with blank faces. So you'd have to explain what it meant by voting for a president, and they would be astounded. You mean you get to vote for who the next leader will be? Why, just imagine if we had a choice between Nero and someone else. They would be astounded. You see, we in this country have a privilege, and we have a political standing that only a very tiny minority of Christians have ever known. And I think ignoring that privilege is not good stewardship. Well, maybe you're of the mindset that, I really ought to exercise my right to vote. But maybe you're thinking to not vote for the candidate of either major party for any number of reasons, and I understand that that number is a large number, and I'm going to give you some things to add to that this morning. I understand that thinking as well, and I respect it, and you might also think that's a way to make a statement. Well, the fact is, though, that only two people have a chance to be elected the next president of the United States, and one of those two candidates will win this election. Therefore, if you don't vote for one of those two candidates, it effectively takes away a vote for the one you might have voted for, holding your nose if you have to, and it would inch forward the likelihood of the worst outcome. It's not evil to vote for a minority party candidate or a write-in candidate. That's okay. But again, I don't believe that's the best stewardship of our right to vote and practicing our faith in our world. So as I said, I want to help you think biblically. So I'm going to give you some very broad considerations to ponder. And I pray that by sharing these things with you, and you'll get to see some of how I think through these things. I hope it'll spur you on to do the same kind of thinking in your own path. And you have a different sphere of influence than I. You have different voices you might be hearing. I don't just mean the ones in your head. I mean the ones in the society around us. But here's the overarching advice I have for you. Above all, first and foremost, do not fret over the outcome of this or any election. Yes, evaluate the issues, pursue the most God-honoring choices available to you, from those available to you, and leave it in the Lord's hands. By the way, a lot of people commented, and a lot of people took me up on my offer, and I was pretty cool. Back early in the Sermon on the Mount, I said, why don't you take 30 days and go on a fast from the news and social media? And a lot of people did that, and a lot of people liked it. And I think I'm on day 120 of my 30 in doing that. I'll tell you, these next 30 days would be a great month to fast from the news and from social media. Trust me, you can do that. You'll still find out what happens. But just something to think on there. But consider this, Proverbs 16:1. I'll share several verses from Proverbs with you, because that's the book of wisdom. Proverbs 16:1, the plans of the heart belong to man. Now that's a way of saying man makes his plans. We have desires within us. We have choices that we can make. We are free among the choices, the options that are before us, and we are responsible for our choices. So the plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. Human responsibility includes our freedom to choose between options of many things every day. You have a lot of choices every day. I mean, this morning you looked in your closet and you had options, and you made choices of what you were going to wear this morning. Most of you did pretty well. The rest of you know who you are. Well, you probably don't know who you are, or you wouldn't have done that. You see, we have freedom, but God is in control. That verse is a statement of the balance between human responsibility and the absolute sovereignty of God. We have freedom, we have choices, we are responsible, and God is in charge. That is a mystery, but that is true. Proverbs 16:33, you may have heard this one before and wondered what it's all about. Proverbs 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. And that's not talking about spilling things into your lap while you eat dinner. But in special circumstances in the theocracy of Israel, a decision could end up needing to be made by a priest casting lots. You can go look that up in your Bible, what casting lots is all about. Think, for our culture, think flipping a coin to decide between two courses of action. And that's a promise that when you've done that, seeking the Lord's will, every such decision is from the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean, oh boy, I don't have to think anymore, I can just flip coins. It's talking about when it comes down to that. As you sift through the avalanche of information that's coming your way and all these impassioned pleas to move in a certain direction, please consider God's control. Proverbs 19:21, very similar to what we read first. Many plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. Don't think for a second that God's will can be thwarted by anything that man comes up with. So I want to give you today 3 exhortations. We're not going to exegete a certain passage. We'll get back to that as soon as I come back to the Sermon on the Mount. But I have 3 exhortations this morning. Number 1, apply sound doctrine. Number 2, weigh ideas carefully. And number 3, choose the least objectionable. Now let me explain to you what I'm saying there. Apply sound doctrine. Let's peek again into the book of Proverbs, chapter 21, verses 1 and 2. And this I made my theme verse or verses for this passage, or for this sermon. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the hearts. That's yet another way of stating the interplay between human responsibility and God's sovereignty. We have a lot of freedom to make choices, so we need wisdom. We need wisdom to be faithful to the moral will of God. We don't know God's decretive will. We don't know for sure how everything's going to be, but we always know his moral will. We always know right from wrong. And so I want to urge you to fight a battle to set aside everything but the Word of God as your ultimate authority. And it's not an easy battle, but we need to do it. I need to do all I can to humble myself under the authority of God's Word. As a believer in Christ, I dare not argue for or lobby for or vote for anything on the basis of my ethnic background, where I grew up or where I now live, my skin color, my personal experiences, or my preferences for what I would like the most to happen. Now, it's impossible to perfectly set aside all those things, but it's less than Christian to not battle against those things, to always seek to humble ourselves and submit our every thought to the Word of God. I need to argue for and lobby for and vote for what best honors God and leads toward treating every human being that I encounter with an even hand and do it in all the stages of life and in every place. Only the gospel can accomplish that. And I need to be a gospel person as I do things like decide who to vote for. Now, I don't want to shock you, but we do not have a political party in our country that can in any way remotely be described as Christian or biblical. We have 2 major parties. Both of them are absolutely riddled with presuppositions of secularism and various shades of immorality and hypocrisy. To equate being a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ with voting in support of one or the other political parties is a very serious error. And it's gotten a lot of Christians into trouble. And many people rightly make fun of people for way overstating a political preference as if it is the Christian thing to do. So, if you're going to do all you can to fight against your own preconceptions and assumptions, if you're going to humble yourself under the authority of Scripture, how do you go about deciding how to apply your faith to the way you vote? That brings us to weigh ideas carefully. Now, here's where my sermon title comes from, and it's the best one I've come up with in a very long time. I smiled all day when I thought up this sermon title. For several presidential election cycles, I've spent at least a few minutes from the pulpit to try to help believers to think biblically. The first Sunday that I was ever the preacher was the Sunday after the presidential election of 1976. So every election from 1980 on, I've been in the position of trying to help Christians to do their best. And every 4 years, the rancor and the division and the polarization and the bitterness in our country has reached new levels. Back when I was a kid, I thought I would never say that. Back when I was young, there was a certain dignity, there was a certain decorum attached to running for president. I remember being in junior high school and having the homework assignment to watch presidential debates. And those debates were actually about ideas. And they actually helped some people to make up their minds. And there was actually a sincere attempt at impartiality. We had a presidential debate, so it was called this last week. It wasn't like that. It was much more like a grade school playground shouting match. It was not decorum. It was not respectful. Both sides ought to be totally embarrassed. And then there was the moderator who injected his own opinions on a couple of places and helped one of the combatants clarify his own thoughts. But he wasn't biased, of course. They ought to be embarrassed. They ought to be ashamed. To use the cliche, it's a zoo out there, would be an understatement. And that's where my title came from. Just popped into my head one day. Let's call it the Quadrennial Zoo Visit. I love quadrennial because most people have no clue what it means. And that means you have to think about it, and that means you might remember it. It means every 4 years. Okay, biennial is every 2 years. I think you can figure out the system there. The situation is certainly a metaphorical zoo, and also, this is even better, the symbols of the two major parties are both animals. So we're going to make our quadrennial zoo visit to the zoo in which there are only two species. Every 4 years, we're pressed to examine what's going on in the political zoo, and so quadrennial zoo visit, here we are. Now, if you were to be the most recent hire at a zoo, and it was an entry-level position, maybe your first job while you were in high school, you can be pretty sure that much of your duties the first couple of weeks are going to involve a shovel and a bucket and somebody bossing you around. Well, sadly, our visit to the zoo involves processing things in a similar vein in a lot of ways. I had to find a way to say something without actually saying it, all right? Let me help you with your shovel. We do not have a major party candidate who believes the gospel or is a good moral example. We'll come back to that problem in a few minutes. But for now, let's think about the set of ideas that are being promoted by these two species in our mythical zoo. Then we'll talk about the people. You see, the ideas are even more important than the particular people who are stating them. Depending on who's in the White House and which party controls the Senate and the House of Representatives, you are going to be led by one set of ideas or another set of ideas. Now, another thing that has changed in the last several presidential elections, compared to when I was younger, back then the major party platforms overlapped more than they differed. They would probably agree on a majority of things, and it was the fringes or the extremes of each one that would actually be a distinction. That's not the same now. Now they are polarized, very far apart, and bitterly opposed to each other without much sense of dignity and decorum and respect and a genuine desire for what's best for the country as a whole. Now, I'm not going to delve into the details. We couldn't possibly do that. We could take a long time on every one of these subpoints. But I would like to help you try to apply biblical principles to several topics. And I'll start with the one that is probably the biggest one for Christians. Let's start with abortion. One of the zoo species has become totally in favor of as many abortions as possible with no restrictions whatsoever. This particular animal regards a terrible Supreme Court decision as what they call the law of the land, even though that is not a correct definition. It is not a law. It was never passed by any Congress at all and never would have been. It's a misnamed law, and it says that any unborn child can be exterminated at the whim of its mother. That is what is supposedly the law of the land. Since that awful 1973 decision in the United States, almost 60 million babies have been murdered before they could be born. Aside from that horrific number itself, which, by the way, that's more than 8 times the number of Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. This is in our country alone. You understand that besides that, right now in the United States, the birth rate has fallen below the replacement rate. In other words, we're on the process of dying as a people, dying as a culture. If it were not for immigration, we would be a shrinking nation. And that's never good for the long-term health of any country. I don't think there's any doubt, nobody could argue against the fact that abortion is the number one worst sin of our nation. And it continues rampant today. Zoo species number 1 has done a total reversal in the last 50 years or so, to the point that now, if someone wants to be a follower of that species, if they believe that all human life is sacred and should be protected from the moment of conception to eternity, they cannot be nominated by that party for any major political decision. It has gone that far. You cannot respect the dignity of human life and be a member of that species. That's what they say. That same species has also vowed that if they win the election, they will eliminate the Hyde Amendment. What is the Hyde Amendment? Well, that was something that was developed after the horrible 1973 decision. And it said, well, we're going to at least make sure, for the sake of conscience, that people who are pro-life will not be forced to pay through their taxes for abortions. The Hyde Amendment is what prevents that. And it has been renewed with every president since 1976, I think it was, when it first came into being. Now, that particular zoo animal has vowed they will immediately eliminate the Hyde Amendment. So, if that animal is in the White House, it means you and I, who are avidly pro-life and believe that God created us in His image and every human being is in the image of God, we will be forced to be complicit in paying for killing unborn human beings. Now, a lot of people don't like to say it that clearly, but that's true. They also vow, if elected, to restore and increase government support for the private entity called Planned Parenthood, which is the single largest provider of murder in the womb. They also support abortion not only in the first months of a pregnancy. That was part of how that was soft-pedaled to us. Well, it's not really a human until some other point in the early months. It isn't really killing. Well, that's gone from 5 weeks to 3 months to the second trimester. Now, they want abortion to be absolutely unlimited, unfettered, all the way to the time of delivery, and some even allow for killing a newborn that was meant to be killed, but they botched it and it was born before they could get to it. Now, zoo species number 2 on this issue promotes the opposite of all of those views. This issue of abortion is the one over which I would say of all of the issues at stake, that's probably the most clear choice. In my mind, it is unconscionable to vote for anyone who is committed to as much abortion as possible. I know there is a movement afoot to de-emphasize that issue and telling Christians there are so many other issues that it's okay for Christians to vote for pro-abortion candidates as long as they support other views with which you might agree. I think that is misguided at best. That there's a pretty clear division on the issue of abortion. Well, let's talk about some of the other ones, though. I want you to think biblically about all these things. There's the issue of the economy and the national debt. There are a lot of biblical principles that come into play there about being indebted and about applying biblical principles to the purpose of government. In this case, one of the zoo animals in my metaphorical zoo is guilty of ridiculously irresponsible overspending and indebtedness. The other one in my metaphorical zoo is also guilty of exactly the same thing. On this issue, I doubt anything short of completely replacing the House of Representatives and the Senate is going to make a difference. Our grandchildren are being set up for a nation in total economic collapse. So on this issue, choose your poison. I mean, we heard all this stuff about the deficit and extra spending and the national debt, and then we shut down the economy. And what did we do? Let's print $2.2 trillion and send everybody a big check. And then let's do it again. And now let's do it some more. Who's arguing against that? I enjoyed my check. I paid off some stuff. I made some contributions. But what silliness is that? Now, there is one zoo animal that says they favor decreasing taxes, and the other one openly wants to raise them significantly, including taxing capital gains the same as regular income, and taxing inheritances and that, so that if your family owns property, we want to make sure that if you die, it can't stay in the family because the family can't afford the taxes to keep it there. It's pretty significant stuff. As soon as the power is shifted in the White House and or the House of Representatives and or the Senate, the party that lost the last election suddenly starts talking about the horrible deficit and the need for reducing the national debt. But they don't get anything done about it. There are usually some token actions that are taken, and then they very quietly get undone later. But it just amuses me how you go back and forth between which animal is in the White House and which party is against deficit spending. It amuses me. Easy to amuse me. Here's another one. We should talk about our nation's policies concerning refugees, illegal immigration, and immigration in general. There is a significant point of difference there. We have one animal that advocates what I consider to be irresponsible and dangerously wide open immigration laws that risk short-circuiting foundational aspects of the uniqueness of our nation. you may differ about some of those things, but they do have a different view than the other ones. The zoo animal that is currently calling the shots has moved us in a profoundly anti-biblical, anti-Christian direction of slamming the door on refugees and exporting many of them whose lives are endangered in other countries. No Christian, no one who believes what the God of the Bible says could possibly be anti-refugee any more than they could possibly be pro-abortion. Now, though I disagree with them, I know that there are people who say that this issue of being anti-refugee is important enough to outweigh the issue of being pro-abortion. And some put those two on a scale and weigh them and choose in favor of a pro-refugee in spite of a pro-abortion. I don't buy that, but I just want you to know there are people who think that way. There are voices that you may hear that will say that to you, and you need to think it through in a biblical fashion. Another biggie these days is, and this one has become very high visibility recently, the role of government and police. Now, the two main animals in the zoo right now are headed in opposite directions. There are those these days, this is very popular, to say that they want to eliminate police, or they euphemize it as defund police. I don't know if they want volunteer police or what they want when they say they don't want to pay them. They talk a good game, but they don't live by that when someone comes to torch their business or murder their family or steal their possessions or rape their women or children. The Bible's pretty clear about the role of government, and we need to think biblically about it. Now, please do not turn that into saying that I support racist or discriminatory police actions. Those are crimes, and they need to be dealt with as crimes. But getting rid of police, not at all a Christian idea. And by the way, no Christian should ever excuse rioting or violence in the name of advocating political change. We have great privileges in this country that most Christians have never had. We can protest, we can publicly speak our mind. That's a precious thing in our country. But the moment that you throw a stone or strike a person or set fire to something, you have stopped being a voice for change and you have become a criminal. And you've lost all your credibility for whatever it was that you were saying ought to be changed. It's never acceptable on any point in the political spectrum. It's just as wrong at a Black Lives Matter event as it is at a Ku Klux Klan event. They're the same thing. Just a few words changed. I addressed this a little more in detail back in August, but something else worth considering under the category of the role of government and police is the different animals' views on critical race theory and identity politics. Both critical race theory and identity politics are patently anti-Christian, anti-biblical concepts. They are racist ways that secular people have come up with to supposedly battle racism. It's the wrong answer to the question. The only way to solve so-called racial problems is to bring people to Christ and to bring them under the authority of Scripture, to have them stand in the grace of God so that they understand that the very definition of race is anti-biblical. I devoted a whole sermon to that back on August 9th. If you didn't hear it, or if you want to hear it again, I commend it to you. Racism in every form and variation of who hates whom or who regards themselves as superior or inferior, every bit of that is openly satanic. Maybe not openly, it's satanic in a glossed over sort of a way. The attitudes toward three words have become a flashpoint these days. The three words are Black Lives Matter. As I said back in August, the biblical viewpoint is that every human being, from the moment of conception to eternity in the future, every human being is in the image of God. And as an image bearer of God, not to be treated differently from any other person. But now we've gotten to the point that in some places, and I've seen people this has happened to, if you affirm the slogan, Black Lives Matter, by agreeing with it, because it's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, if you affirm Black Lives Matter by agreeing with it and adding, yes, all lives matter, that is regarded as racist by some people. They're saying, we have to cure racism, and to do that, we have to single out one race that you can't say is equal to the others. That's so absurd. You might tell it frustrates me a little bit. We also pointed out in August that there's a huge difference between those three words as a slogan, Black Lives Matter. It's true. It may be incomplete, but it's absolutely true. There's a big difference, though, between that slogan and the organization with that name. The organization, Black Lives Matter, openly condemns the biblical view of race, openly condemns the biblical view of manhood, womanhood, marriage, and government. It openly promotes Marxism under a different label. And it's not something that any Christian can possibly be in agreement with. Not if you believe the Scripture, because they're mutually exclusive and contradictory. But there are way too many people these days jumping on a social bandwagon of unbiblical and anti-biblical approaches to dealing with racism and what is now labeled social justice. I also talked about that a little bit back in August. If you add an adjective to the word justice, you're not talking about God's justice. Justice is just, which means righteous. If you have to put an adjective on that, you're limiting it. And God's justice is not limited. It is universal. And in some places, it's such that if you say the wrong thing, you will be ostracized and condemned. There is not freedom of speech in some people's ideas, some people's minds, if you don't agree 100% with them. One of the most clever and insightful comments I've heard in recent days came after week 1 of the National Football League's season. Now, I didn't watch any games then, but I saw some excerpts and I heard some commentary about it. The NFL broadcasts began with a very preachy, pro-Black Lives Matter, pro critical race theory message. And it was, some people said it was like the sermon before the football game. And then I heard the commentary. The comment was, and this cuts two ways, the NFL is preaching when it should be playing games. Meanwhile, the church is playing games when it should be preaching. You know, we can't just laugh at the first part of that and not realize there's a dagger in our chests for the second part of it. Capital C Church, we're failing our nation by how pathetically we are accomplishing spreading the gospel. We need to step it up. One more category. I may still have a friend or two left. Let me keep weeding them out. But one more category to comment on. The LGBTQ plus agenda. the issue of same-sex marriage. You might lump in morality in general. Very important issues. And there is a distinction between the two animals in our zoo. On this one of those animals is caving in to the rapidly degenerating bandwagon of what Isaiah calls calling good evil and calling evil good. One of them is caving in. The other one has already finished caving in. We have no good choices in that regard. The only choice we have is preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and living as gospel-transformed people, speaking truth in love. And you know what? It just might lead us back into what we recently studied in the Sermon on the Mount about being persecuted for the sake of righteousness. The Supreme Court of the United States has made both of these things, the LGBTQ plus agenda and same-sex marriage, they've made it worse for us in the last few years and then again in the last few months. Like they invented the right to abortion back in 1973, in 2015, the Supreme Court invented the right to same-sex marriage. I will never forget where I was that day. It was a day in July, I believe, 2015. It was either day 2 or day 3, where I was teaching in Russia at a family camp on family and marriage. And I had said at the beginning, I said, it might be happening this summer that in America they could legalize same-sex marriage. That won't fly in Russia. But I remember I had done my morning session and I came to lunch, and one of the guys came up to me with his cell phone and pointing to it and babbling as if I had a clue what he was saying. I got a translator and he was saying, "They did it. They did it. See, there's the story. They did it." And it was kind of like, "I'll pray for you, brother. You have to go home to that." They invented that. And recently they found a new definition of gender and claimed that civil rights laws, where the writers of those laws never had a clue that the words would be twisted like that, and they've applied those words in a totally different way. Friends, our world needs the gospel. We need to live in such a way that we will not be insulted by being called a voting bloc, because we have something so much important than a vote. A vote is important. Do you get what I'm saying? Anything less and anything different than the gospel is like putting Band-Aids on cancer. Now, this list could go on and on. The preacher always says that when he's run out of stuff. But it would be worthwhile talking about health care, voter identification, illegal alien voting, school choices, foreign trade, foreign policy in general, environmentalism and environmental regulations, military issues, drug enforcement, and on and on. And there's just less and less discernible overlap between the animals in the zoo. So where does that leave us? Well, if we apply sound doctrine and understand God is in control and we have some freedom and some responsibility, and we weigh all the ideas carefully, we have to boil it down to this: choose the least objectionable. Now, I hope you agree with my conviction that the best stewardship of our privilege to vote is to vote for Zoo Animal 1 or Zoo Animal 2. Now, all of my convictions are right. You understand that? Just ask me. I'll be glad to defend them all. No, I respect other convictions. I hope I make a case that is the best use of your vote. I choose to try to avoid the unintended consequence of helping a worse candidate get elected, as much as I value the privilege to vote for a better candidate. Now, you can get to heaven even if you don't share that conviction, but I hope I'm helping you think differently. Need I mention that it is the President of the United States who makes nominations to the Supreme Court? And the current president just made his 3rd nomination. That's a third of the court. Elections have consequences. How important is that? Now, I've dodged it so far, but I need to talk about the elephant in the room. I also need to talk about the donkey in the room. When you decide which list of ideas you prefer to have dominate our nation's leadership for the next 4 years, whatever choice you make, it comes with individual names at the top of the ballot. And what can we say about the presidential choices? Now, I'm old enough to say I have lived under 13 different presidents. And I will say, having lived under 13 different presidents, neither of the two who have reasonable shots at the office for the next 4 years pass my own smell test for being presidential, whatever that is. I cannot enthusiastically support either candidate. So I am moving from the individual, setting that aside for a moment, and moving to the set of ideas. I don't like either one of them, but I certainly find one far less objectionable in the sight of God than the other. So while I pray for all that God puts us in positions of authority over us, like 1 Timothy chapter 2 says, that's why we so often pray for the president and our governors and our mayors and all of those people. We're supposed to pray for them. And I do, and I hope you do too. But understand, when you look at the names at the top of those lists, neither choice is morally worth following, or worthy of being followed, I should say. One is well known for a history of multiple acts of adultery in the past. The other one also lives under a cloud of suspicion and innuendo for sexual abuse. One of them has chosen as a spiritual advisor, his primary spiritual advisor, a woman false prophet. The other one is a member of the largest pseudo-Christian cult in the world, and he hypocritically votes the opposite of his church's doctrine, which he claims he believes. Last I checked, that's called hypocrisy. Do you understand? Both of them have flipped on certain issues. For example, one used to be pro-abortion and has changed to pro-life. The other one used to be pro-life but has changed to pro-abortion. He used to lobby for and vote for the Hyde Amendment, and now he said, elect me and I'll get rid of that awful thing that I supported for decades. One is relatively old for the job. The other one is older. You know, like somebody said 4 years ago, 325 million people in the country, we got down to these two? There's some legitimacy to that. Both of them mess up facts frequently. One of them said in a speech a couple of weeks ago, he gave very specific statistics. He said that in the military, there have been 6,114 COVID deaths among the military. There have been 118,894 infections. Now, what are the actual numbers? 7 deaths. Now, 6,114 is a very specific number. It's a lot different from 7. Almost 1,000 times different. 118,894 infections. The real number, well, he was a whole lot closer on that one. The real number is just over 40,000. He only missed that one by tripling it. The other one he multiplied by 900 times. The other one, he's not too precise with words and often with facts. He can't say anything without adding a huge or a very, very or more than ever or the most in history. If you would like a job with job security, all right, become a fact checker for the media to deal with politicians and what they say. You won't be out of work anytime soon. Now, there is a contrast in running mates. One has a running mate who is also committed to nearly everything that we oppose. The other has a professing evangelical running mate. Now, some people have their issues with that gentleman too, but boy, that's certainly a contrast in those two. So what should we do? We need to understand that God is sovereign over all of these things. We need to understand that this rampant moral decay in our culture that we're seeing isn't just happening now. It is the cumulative result of countless decisions that have been being made over generations, whittling away here and knocking off a little bit there. And understand, we will get the leaders that God intends for us to use for His purpose. Now, I pray that God's purpose for our nation includes a 21st century miracle akin to the 18th century Great Awakening. Hey, I'll sign up. If we can't fit all the people in on Sundays, I'll preach every day of the week. If people want to come and hear the gospel and be taught the Word of God. God's purpose might be removing our nation as the leading power in the world. I can't say. I don't know. And anybody who says they know, don't vote for them. But I trust God explicitly to do His will. I have no qualms about praying that the rapture will come before the election. Thursday afternoon, I prayed the rapture would come before this sermon. I have no problem praying in general, even so, come, Lord Jesus. But you know, more than likely, the sun is going to rise on schedule the morning after the coming election day. There will be an inauguration in January. No matter who wins, I'm going to step out on a limb and say, I believe there's going to be bitter, hateful, rancorous opposition to the results of the election. I don't know which side it'll be, but I guarantee, I can't guarantee, I strongly believe it will happen, and it will be just as embarrassing this time as it was 4 years ago, and I don't care which side you're on. That we ought to have nothing to do with that. But we do need to continue to step up our efforts to preach the gospel to everybody around us and to help the gospel spread around the world. We're not the only nation in trouble. Regardless of the election results, our task is clear. A couple of closing thoughts. Proverbs 14, 33 and 34. A lot of you have heard this many times. Wisdom rests in the heart of one who has understanding, but in the hearts of fools it is made known. In other words, the fool needs to learn what the wise knows. Then it says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. So when you cast your ballot, and I sure hope you do, make sure it is done prayerfully. And just imagine that when you exit that little polling booth, or when you drop that ballot in the mail, or when you drop it off at the early voting place, or whatever it is, imagine that then Jesus taps you on the shoulder and said, who'd you vote for? Well, you can give a Peter answer, Lord, you know. But can you articulate, Lord, based upon what I know from your word, I did my best, and it was this. Finally, I want to say that I get grieved at how rancorous even Christians are becoming. You know, I've had more vehement reaction lately about these things than I have any doctrine in the Scriptures. Who do we think we are that we care so much about a stupid mask? The people that we elected are doing their very best to try to keep us from dying. All right? It's not a sin to wear one of these things. It's okay. You look kind of bad. Faces like mine, it might be an improvement. But what do we care about the most? What do we care about the most? Weigh the ideas that are promoted by the animals in our zoo. Prayerfully make the wisest choice you can before the Lord. But whatever that is, love one another and be committed to one another more than ever. To sever fellowship or to withdraw from serving with a brother or sister in Christ over how they vote is tragic. And it's sinful. Don't let these things divide us. Romans 14:10-13 says this, "But you, why do you judge your brother? Or you again, why do you regard your brother with contempt?" Now, the context here is things that the Bible doesn't say anything about. The Bible doesn't say which animal to vote for. Okay? So this is when we have to make our human decisions based upon women. Why do you judge your brother? Or again, why do you regard your brother with contempt? For we all will stand before the judgment seat of God. And that's all by grace, by the way. For it is written in Isaiah 14, "As I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall give praise to God." So then, each one of us will give an account of himself to God. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather determine this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in a brother's way. To let how a person votes in a secular election be a determining factor in who we fellowship with, that is to dishonor the Lord. That is to harm his precious bride, which is the church. And with that, let's pray. Father, we praise you that we will stand before your judgment seat. And we know that no one gets there except by the grace that you've extended to us in Christ. And we know that each one of us will give an account of ourselves to you. So, Father, make us wise, make us humble, make us gentle, make us truthful, make us bold in the proclamation of the gospel, and use us individually and collectively for your name's sake. Father, I could understand that for maximum spiritual potency, maybe many of my words from today could just as well be deleted. But we trust you, we honor you, and we want to glorify you. And to that end we pray in Jesus' name.